Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Developing a Proper Worldview. This is going to be part 61 or episode 61. I'm not sure what I was calling them previously. It's been a while since I've been doing these. We'll just go with episode 61. But we're in the midst of the, not really sure how to title this section, like the American Foundation section, because again, the way this conspiracy was unfolded in my mind, the first thing that woke me to the truth was 9/11. Just looking into the 9/11 things, and then really the second most impactful. I watched this documentary on 9/11 called Loose Change. We're going to get to that down the road. But then the second most impactful documentary that I saw was this one that we're about to start, called Freedom to Fascism. And I was in the midst of my discoveries of the New World Order system and how it ties into biblical prophecy, and this one is just kind of it's so well produced and so informational and documented and backed up and factual that it's almost overwhelming. Like, I remember when I made a bunch of DVDs with Loose Change and Freedom to Fascism, and I was going to go around and put them in people's mailboxes. But that's illegal, so I never did it. But that's how important I thought this was. I thought, man, everybody needs to see this. Because if everybody sees this information, you can't deny the truth of it. You can't hide from it. It's that overwhelming, that factual. You see this information, you now have a choice before you. You either change your entire worldview and the way you look at things, or you live in denial. You suppress the truth and live in denial. Which unfortunately is what a lot of people do. But again, if you're just catching this randomly, make sure to go back and watch from the beginning, because this is laid out in a step-by-step process. It's really it's developing a proper worldview. You have to know certain things before delving into other things. Otherwise, you can be misled or come to false conclusions and whatnot. And so, the first thing you need to understand that this is a biblical issue. That the scriptures talk about a beast system, a worldwide kingdom. That's what a beast is in the Bible and prophecy. It's an empire, a kingdom. And the Bible talks about, at the end of times, a worldwide empire that causes all to take a mark of allegiance. And it'll persecute those who stand against it, true Christians and the Jews and whatnot. But it's important to understand that, because once you understand that, once you're born again and you have spiritual foundation, you have the scriptures as your foundation, you can then start to look at the world and see it for what it really is. Things start to click, things start to make sense, you start to understand the political atmosphere, you start to understand why things are the way they are and why things are moving the way they are, because it's the way God has designed it. It's foretold. These things must come to pass. So you have to have that biblical understanding before jumping into anything else. So that was our part one, was laying that foundation of the scriptures, making sure that you know the gospel, and hoping that you receive that truth and have your eyes enlightened to understand spiritual matters. And then you really need to dedicate yourself to the scriptures. You need to understand the scriptures for yourself. You can't go to God on Judgment Day and say, so-and-so told me or so-and-so told me. You have to know the truth. We each must give an account of ourselves. So it's dependent on you knowing the truth. So the scriptures are available. Get them in your hands. Read them. Study them. Learn them. And then you can start to understand the world. So after part one, we jumped into the creation evolution debate, just to show how Satan has laid this false foundation of pseudoscience, tricking people into discrediting the Bible, discrediting the Creator, by thinking that they have logical, intellectual reasoning for doing so, but really they're trusting in a fake science. They're trusting in fairy tales. academic, educated, yes, with great terminology and men that have filled their brains with educated nonsense, so that they sound smart and sound sophisticated, but it's all a delusion. And so in part 2, we clearly laid that out. And then we had part 2B, or I would say part 3A, the Megiddo prophecies, or the Megiddo DVDs, where it kind of just outlined the history of the world and where things are going from this biblical perspective, understanding the satanic occult agenda that's going on behind the scenes. And then part 3B, we're showing how America ties into that, how America is really at the forefront of this New World Order system. And so we started with the Cutting Edge series, America's Secret Beginnings, to show that America was not founded as a Christian nation. The heritage, the foundations of America are occult. They're Luciferian, they're satanic, and there's an agenda there. America has a mission, and it's to form this New World Order, this beast system. And so now we're really going to start delving into some of the deep parts of that. And this DVD we're about to start, Freedom to Fascism, is really where we start to get into some of that deeper stuff. This DVD started with a guy who simply just wanted to he had heard that income tax was an unconstitutional tax, and so he wanted to research that and find out, is there any truth to this? If there is, why are we paying income tax under threat of law? And as he studied that, he discovered something much more sinister. He started to discover the New World Order, because the Federal Reserve System, the monetary banking system, is really the bedrock of the New World Order. It's they control the finances, they control the institutions. And so when you start to look into that, you very quickly start to come into the secret agendas of these people, and you start to they write about it in their own letters, in their own books, in their own words. They talk about it. They just expect the public to be so out of touch and so unaware that they don't even pay attention to what these people are talking about. Our own politicians will stand up and talk about a new world order, and it just goes in one ear and out the other. People don't even really pay attention to what that means. But so while researching the income tax, he comes to discover the New World Order, and this documentary is phenomenal. So I think without any further introduction, we'll just jump into it. So let's do it. All right, here we go. A time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. George Orwell. Orwell knew about the New World Order conspiracy and wrote about it in his science fiction books. Powerful bankers achieved their fathers' and great-grandmothers' goals. America's never been the same. 1913 is when the Federal Reserve was illegally...
The year was 1913. Woodrow Wilson was president, and powerful banking interests, who had been trying for years, finally achieved their long-term goal.
My understanding, there's 12 families that run the world that we nickname the Illuminati. These are the highest level occultists that run everything behind the scenes. The Rockefeller family is one of those 12 families. I don't think the Morgans and Warburgs are, but they're very high up there as agents of the Illuminati families.
Of a silent coup d'etat by taking control of the American government. The first thing they did to accomplish their takeover was convince Secretary of State Philander Knox to lie to the American people and tell them that the 16th Amendment, the Income Tax Amendment, had been legally ratified by the states when it was not. The bankers knew that this tax would ultimately end up in their pockets. Because of this fraud, the American people were led to believe there was now a tax on their labor. Congress and the President are completely aware of this fraud, and it was even cited in a recent court case.
If you examine the 16th Amendment carefully, you'll find that a sufficient number of states never ratified that amendment. U.S. District Court Judge James Fox in 2003.
That very same year, the bankers committed their second and by far the most diabolical fraud ever perpetrated on the American people by bribing senators to pass the Federal Reserve Act without the required constitutional amendment.
All in favor, say aye.
They did this during Christmas vacation, when many senators were home celebrating the holidays with their families. And that's how the unconstitutional Federal Reserve Act came into being.
See, and you need to understand, the Constitution, specifically in the Constitution, I think it's Article 2, Section 8 or something like that, specifically states that Congress has the right to issue money. And our founding fathers, especially I think like Jefferson and Madison maybe, or Jackson, but they warned against central banks because Europe was ruled by central banks. The Rothschilds had taken over the banking system as far back as I think even the Knights Templars supposedly discovered Solomon's gold, Solomon's temple, and discovered all the gold and started a banking system where they would loan people money and charge usury or interest, and through that became filthy rich, and the Rothschilds run that. And so these central banks had taken over Europe. So whoever controls the money controls the governments. It's not the politicians, it's the money. All right, they pay off, they control everything. And so our founding fathers warned against that, said we must keep away from a central bank. And so they gave Congress the right to issue money, to control money, to control the issuance of it. But right from the get-go, central bankers were trying to come in and take over, and they were shut down for 150 years or whatever because people were knowledgeable and understood the danger that if you give foreign entities control of the money, they'll control industry, they'll control education, they'll control the media, they'll control the politicians, they'll control everything. Whoever makes and prints the money controls everything. And so they tried to stop it. And then in 1913, they snuck in this unlawful, unconstitutional act to give the Federal Reserve control of issuing money and controlling inflation and deflation and whatnot. But there's a lot of controversy because they did it when a lot of Congress wasn't there. It wasn't properly ratified amongst the states. I don't understand a lot of that because I'm not a legal expert. I don't understand how bills get passed or what's required or how the states ratify things. But there's a lot of controversy, and the Constitution specifically states that Congress has control of the money, not bankers. The Federal Reserve System is not federal. It's not a government. It's a private industry. It has stockholders. It's owned. And its owners are the same owners that own the European central banks, that own the World Bank. And that's the Illuminists, the Illuminati, the 12 families control it all. And then the income tax is unconstitutional as well, but we'll get into that.
They were very clever, and they understood that whoever issued the money for America would control the government. The bankers won, and the American people lost, because most politicians will sell their soul for $1. And now the Federal Reserve could issue dollars legally. As Mayor Rothschild said, "Give me control of a nation's money supply, and I care not who makes its laws." He knew that he and the other bankers would now control the laws of the nation. Government gave these bankers one of its most important powers, and now had to borrow money from them and pay interest to finance the government. So the American people were forced to lower their standard of living and pay a graduated income tax to the government, just so the government could give these bankers more profits. President Woodrow Wilson, who signed the Federal Reserve Act into law, later said, in regret, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is now controlled by its system of credit. We are no longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men."
You see, just a statement like that alone from a president ought to be so shocking, so alarming that people take up arms and storm the Capitol and demand that something be done. But again, people are just ignorant, and as long as they're kept comfortable and they get their materialistic nonsense, their TVs, their phones, their nice shoes and whatever else, and they'll stay passive.
The Federal Reserve was created by Congress in 1913, and it was entrusted with the power granted originally to the Congress by the U.S. Constitution to coin money and regulate the value thereof.
What's your name?
Jan Crafting?
Hi, Jen. I'm Aaron Russo. I produced the movie
Is
Trading.
this a joke? Am I gonna
No,
make
it's not a
foolish?
joke.
Okay, good.
No. I produced the movie Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and The Rose with Bette Midler. Many movies. I'm doing a feature film. And my film is about my quest to find out whether or not people pay income taxes. Do you pay an income tax?
Yes, I do.
You do?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a law that requires you to pay an income tax?
Have I ever read it? You mean in the page, black and white? No, no.
So you pay the income tax, I assume?
Of late. Well, actually, no, I didn't file last year, but, I'm sorry, is this on film? No, I paid my tax.
My question to you is, have you ever seen a law that says you have to pay an income tax?
The law is that guy that wears that badge and a gun. That's the one that puts you in jail. That's the law.
Actually, I can't stand the IRS. They're evil.
Do you have any fear of the IRS?
Not really, because I'm Canadian.
I think it's actually unconstitutional, is what I've heard. But to avoid any hassle, I pay it.
If there was no law and I wasn't afraid of them coming and taking me to jail, absolutely, I wouldn't pay taxes.
Okay, then no, I wouldn't pay income taxes.
It's a no-brainer. You wouldn't pay.
I wouldn't pay it.
Why would anybody?
Because that's what they tell us we must do, else we're bad Americans.
Would you pay it?
No.
Would you pay it?
No.
Why would you pay taxes if you're an actor?
The income tax is not legal because it would be a direct tax and it is not apportioned as the Constitution demands.
If it's against the Constitution, then why are we doing it?
I really expected that, of course, there's a law that you can point to in the law book, the code, that requires you to file a tax return. Of course there is. Maybe I don't know what it is right then as he was speaking to me, but sure. So naively, I agreed to go off and research it and get back to him. 3.5 months later, I was at that point where I couldn't find the statute that clearly made a person liable, at least not me and most people I know, and I had no choice in my mind except to resign.
I had to leave the IRS because I presented evidence that I had accumulated indicating that the agency was violating the law and violating people's rights. And I asked the agency for a response to my sincere concerns. And the answer I got was that they would not respond to my concerns and that they would provide me with the paperwork necessary to tender my resignation.
But We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education put a full-page ad in the USA Today on July 7, 2000. And within the body of that ad was a $50,000 challenge for anyone that could show the law. And to me...
Think about that. These are former IRS agents. Like, if they're talking about this, shouldn't we listen? If they lost their jobs because of this, it's they have nothing to gain, they have everything to lose. They're standing up and saying, hold up now, this income tax is unlawful, it's unconstitutional. We ought to listen to that. These are experts in that field who lost everything to bring this truth to us.
$50,000 is a lot of money. So I went after that and did the research based on the fact that I thought, let's put this baby to bed. I'm hearing all these rumors. I'm going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I'll answer these people's questions that are asking me, and then I'll win this $50,000. And, based on the research that I did throughout the year 2000 and that I'm still doing, I have not found that law. I've asked Congress, we've asked a lot of people in the IRS commissioners, helpers. They can't answer, because if they answer, the American people are going to know that this whole thing is a fraud.
I was surprised to hear these highly trained and decorated IRS agents telling me there was no law requiring American citizens to file a 1040 or to pay an income tax on their labor.
I haven't filed an federal income tax return since I left.
I have not filed a tax return since 1999. Approximately 67 million people don't file an income tax return.
I made a decision to go to Washington so I could attend the We the People Foundation press conference. They were going to serve a class action lawsuit on the IRS, signed by over 3,000 people, because the IRS has refused to show the law that makes Americans liable to file a 1040 or to pay an income tax on their labor. I was very curious as to why the IRS refused to show the law, as it seemed such a simple thing to do. Yet I was skeptical about the Foundation's claims. There had to be a law, right? I mean, we've all been told over and over and over again that we had to pay income taxes.
No answers, no taxes. No answers, no taxes. No answers, no taxes.
Most people believe that the income tax system is legal and that the revenue from the tax is used in the public interest. However, there is a substantial, conclusive body of evidence that proves that our income tax system represents the most pernicious form of tyranny. It is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated by government against the working men and women of America.
American citizens, along with the Foundation, have been asking the IRS to specifically provide them with the underlying legal foundation upon which they administer and enforce the personal income tax laws in our country.
At the national level, when people would attempt to contact somebody of a much higher authority, say the commissioner, same kind of thing. They would get answers that were in effect non-answers.
There are a group of people standing outside today who...
Do you realize how insane that is? Like, it really is tyranny. If I jaywalk and I get a fine and I go to court and I say, can you show me which law I broke? They can open the law books and point to a specific statute. Law 64.3-244 or whatever. It's in the law books. It's been passed by your local government or state government or whatever law it is that you broke. If it's a city law, a state law, or federal law, there's an actual statute that can be pointed to. Because laws have to be passed legally. They have to go through the proper procedures. That's why we have freedom. There aren't just tyrants that just make up things and enforce things and oppress people and say, hey, you do what I say. No, you have to legally pass a law, which goes through our representative bodies and whatnot, and gets passed and entered into the books. So the fact that there is no law that says that you as an average individual private citizen has to pay income tax. There's no statute. It's never gone through the proper procedures, but it's enforced at gunpoint. Like the IRS will come raid you, take your bank accounts, take everything you own, and put you in prison. That's tyranny. They're enforcing something that's not a legal law. It hasn't gone through the process. That's insane, and that the American public has been conditioned to just accept that, to just it's just the way it is. It's mind-blowing.
Assert that no law requires you to pay taxes, and that you will not answer their petition to the government as to whether they're required to pay taxes. Are they required to pay taxes?
I've been paying my taxes ever since I had my first job, and I think it's a fundamental construct of our nation that those of us who expect and demand the services from our government that the government provides, be they the protection of our country through the military, or be they the education of our children, or be they the protection of our environment, that
your income tax pays for none of that. The education of children is paid for by property tax. That's what pays for education. The defense of the country is paid by corporate income tax, which is a lawful tax. The roads are paid for by a gas tax. The income tax does not pay for any of that. Income tax is a redistribution of wealth. It's to make the stockholders of the Federal Reserve and the central banks rich. It's to take money out of the pockets of everybody else and to put it in their pockets. That's all it is. It's the Federal Reserve charging our government interest to borrow them money, which is insane. You think about the phrase national debt. We're $48 trillion in debt, or whatever it is. I have no clue what the actual number is, but nobody ever stops to stop and think like, wait a minute, how can the government be in debt? Who does the government owe money to? They're the government. They're supposed to be the top of the food chain. They're supposed to be the ones making and issuing money and distributing money. How can they owe interest on that? Nobody ever stops to think that through. What they're doing is they're borrowing money from the elite, from the Illuminati, from the New World Order. They're borrowing money from the money changers, the bankers, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, the Kennedys, the Onassis. They're borrowing money from them through the Federal Reserve and through other central banking systems, and then they're being charged interest, which is the national debt, that we then pay back through income tax.
That we must pay for those services. So yes, I think there is a fundamental obligation, and that
it's the same scam the Illuminati's been running since the days of the Knights Templar. When they discovered this banking system, when they discovered usury and how they could stay rich and control the money and thereby control everything through this, it's the same system.
It's an understood and well accepted one.
Joe Bannister and I had a meeting in the White House with President Clinton's economic advisor, Jason Furman. He accepted the remonstrance for the president. On June 2nd, I called and spoke with him. His words were, "We have decided that the issue of the legality of the income tax is not a high priority matter for the White House, and we will not be participating in any conference on the subject."
He would have been hung in revolutionary times.
I decided not to eat until my death, or until the government agreed to send their experts to meet with the experts from the tax honesty movement. And with the help of Congressman Bartlett, a deal was made.
I'm very pleased that through these several trying weeks and now months, that we have secured the agreement of the IRS and the Justice Department, because some of the questions are beyond the purview of IRS, that they will both attend a public symposium where these issues can be formally addressed.
Last Thanksgiving, DOJ and IRS notified Congressman Bartlett that they would not participate. Congressman Bartlett then waited until late January. He informed me that he would not be participating.
Why do you think you've been able to get away with not paying or filing your income taxes for so long?
Well, first of all, I've not gotten away with...
Yeah, just look at the way they phrase that question, getting away. Like, you're not getting away with anything. If there is no law, you know, other people are like, well, I gotta pay mine. If you ain't courageous enough to stand up to tyranny, you know, you can't fault people who are.
If anything, I'm not hiding from anyone. I'm simply asking the IRS to show me the laws that apparently require me to do these things, and they are suspiciously reticent to answer questions from me, and of course there are millions of other people, many other organizations who have attempted to get answers. They act very suspiciously when asked to simply sit down at the table with the American people and discuss what their obligations are. Rather than pulling up a chair, they pull out a club.
As a matter of fact, David K. Johnston of the New York Times asked Terry Lemons of the IRS, why won't the IRS answer the questions set forth in the petitions from the American people? Mr. Lemon's response was, the government is answering the questions through enforcement actions in the courts. This is a very chilling remark on the government's use of brute force instead of civility and logic.
The federal government itself refuses to provide the American people who are coercively being subjected to this extraction of their private property without any underlying legal justification. There is no law that requires the average American worker in the private sector to pay a direct, unapportioned tax on their labor and compensation for services. There is no law.
The march will stop in front of the IRS building.
They are now going to serve a class action lawsuit on the IRS. Very courageous.
My name is Charles Bell, and I'm here to serve this complaint on behalf of the American people to the Internal Revenue Service. The complaint is accompanied by an affidavit. It's under the hand of Robert Schultz.
Case was served. We'll call you with the case number. Case has been filed. We'll call you with the case number. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate your time.
America, baby! Freedom!
Today, effectively, the people have said to their servant government that that our rights are not going to be any longer denied, and that we're going to have answers to our petition, our legitimate lawful petitions for redress of grievances, which are guaranteed in the First Amendment to our Constitution. So once and for all, we will get an answer.
On August 31st, 2005, federal judge Emmett Sullivan ruled, the government does not have to answer the American people's questions, even though it is guaranteed in the First Amendment. Our courts have made a decision that government does not have to show the law that it enforces. And the press never reported on this. Have we given this judge the authority to overrule the Constitution, the very foundation of American life?
I believe that in both spirit and substance, our tax system has come to be un-American. Death and taxes may be inevitable, but unjust taxes are not.
The country's taxes must be fixed, and I know what to do with it. If you think you're paying too much now, just wait till I get through with it.
Now, Mr. Hanley, I'd like to ask you something. What does the government do with all the money we give them in taxes?
When President Reagan was elected, one of the first things that he did was appoint a blue ribbon panel of business people headed by Peter Grace. and is commonly referred to as the Grace Commission. And their job was to research all the various areas of the federal government and make a report. One of the quotes from the Grace Commission is, 100% of what is collected is absorbed solely by interest on the federal debt. All individual income tax revenues are gone before 1 nickel is spent on the services taxpayers expect from government.
If we pay the salaries of
The thing is, these people that protest and file petitions, I mean, praise God that there's people out there that do the research, that understand the legalities, that you know, can look into tax law and actually understand what's going on. But when you understand that this entire system, the banking system, is the bedrock foundation of the New World Order, you're not going to beat that. You can't stop that. It's too massive. It's too powerful. They're not going to allow it. They'll ignore, you know, like they probably ignored these petitioners, or they'll imprison, you know, if they can get away, if it's a small enough group or an individual that's resisting, they'll just throw you in prison, or they'll kill you. You're not going to be able to affect the Federal Reserve. There's been congressmen, who we'll see in this video, some of them who have attempted to go against the Federal Reserve, who have tried to get an audit, you know, just to get a start. Let's see how much gold is in Fort Knox. Let's see how much gold the American people supposedly have that's supposed to back our financial system. And they've been shut down. Some people have mysteriously died. So it's a fruitless battle. So it kind of puts you in a conundrum. Like there's this duality that exists within a Christian. Like, I understand we're supposed to submit to authorities, and there is no authority but what God has put in place. Even when that authority is evil and tyrannical, God has a purpose and a plan for it. And so you understand that, and you understand that this is prophesied, that the New World Order is going to happen, that Christians will be persecuted, that all these things are going to happen, and it eventually leads to the return of Jesus Christ. So you understand that. But then there's a part of you that I guess maybe growing up American and growing up with the ideology of freedom, and that likes that idea, that thinks, man, you know, tyranny needs to be put down. Like, if the people during the Revolutionary period went to war over like a 1 cent stamp tax or whatever it was, or I forget what was there was like 3 taxes, wasn't there? There was the tea tax, I think, stamp tax, and something else. But these small taxes cause them to say, no, we're not. It's tyrannical. It's you're not doing this fairly. You know, we're not just going to turn over all our possessions to the rich elite, you know, without reason. So and that's what led to the revolution. Nowadays, you look at what's going on; it's insane. But so there's part of that goes, man, you know, a judge who makes a statement like that blatantly violates the Constitution, like, that's treason. That's the Constitution is supposed to be the authority of this land. Politicians, bankers, judges, whoever that takes stands against the Constitution ought to be held accountable for treason. So that there's that part of it too. So it's hard to balance those two ideas. Like, there's part of me that says, man, these people need to be hung. You know, they need to be tried for sedition and treason, and put out of office and put down. And the American people need to storm the Capitol, and there should be a war, you know, to take back freedoms. But then there's the other part of me that goes, this is God's plan. Christian people are supposed to live quiet, peaceable lives. We can speak out against the tyranny, we can point it out, but we can't resist with violence. So you have to balance those two things. It can be hard. You know, when you hear about tyranny, it stirs something in you that just makes you go, man, you know, injustice and unfairness causes a rage within you. You know, it's
congressmen and the senators, we're supporting them, aren't we?
Well, yes.
Yes. Well, then why can't we list them as dependents and deduct them?
have been brainwashed. People have been told, that you need this income tax system to fund government, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, my question is, well, if that's true, how did we fund government from 1776 to 1913?
The main purpose of the income tax is not to raise revenue, but to redistribute wealth and to control society.
And a lot of people might say, well, gee, if there wasn't an income tax, what would happen to education? They don't understand that education is paid for the most part, out of state and local taxes, your property tax. People might say, well, how are we going to build and maintain our highways if there's no money coming into the government? We need our highways. There is a tax on every gallon of gasoline that people buy. Proceeds from the income tax do not pay for highway construction. The amount of money that we spend on defense is exactly equal to the amount of corporate income tax, which is quite legal and quite constitutional.
I think we should not want the income tax for several reasons. One is that it is the instrument of totalitarianism. It is the means by which the government can manipulate people and put you into a condition of servitude.
Every year you give the federal government a form that says, here's how all my money worked. If you lie, you could go to prison. So you're required to give them a financial statement that under, the force of law could put you in prison if it's not impeccable, right? And under the law, they're supposed to do the same. They're supposed to give you back a financial statement that says, here's what we did with your money. Except you comply and they don't. In fiscal 99, the Department of Defense had 1.1 trillion of undocumentable adjustments. The following year, they had 2.3 trillion of undocumentable adjustments.
I decided to call the IRS. I spoke to Anthony Burke.
But that's an Illuminati symbol. That's the IRS symbol. That's an owl right there. That's the same owl that's found on the $1 bill. If you're looking at the front of a $1 bill, in the upper right corner, there's a shield around the one. It's the only shield. The rest of them are just ones. It's Rothschild is red shield, so it's the Rothschild logo. It's a shield around the one, and in the upper left corner of that shield, it goes like this. It's like a half moon. The shield goes, like. That's a terrible job, but you'll see if you look on the $1 bill. But maybe I have one. Do I have one? Let's yeah. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. Around this one, there's a circle, circle, circle. Around this one, there's a shield. And in this upper, would be the upper left corner, if you're looking at the dollar bill, the upper left corner, very tiny, I hope you guys can see it, that same owl, ghost owl or whatever it is there. And the owl represents Illuminati because it can see in the dark. It has hidden wisdom, which is what occult means. It's a symbol of hidden knowledge. And so here the Illuminati is holding the scales of justice, or weights and measures. I suppose it could be both, but it's the Illuminati in control of it. It makes sense for the IRS for that to be weights and measures. So it's showing that who's in control.
In media relations. He was very nice to me, and I explained to him that I was an award-winning film producer and that I was doing a documentary on the IRS. He seemed a bit stunned by this, then explained to me that Commissioner Everson nor anybody else would go on film to discuss the income tax. But he did say he would call me back. I thanked him for that, but I couldn't help wondering, why was the government making it so difficult for people to see the law? So I decided to bring my crew down to the IRS building to see if I could find some employees to interview. And here's what happened.
I said you cannot film me, that's it. Who are you to tell me I can't film here? What's the law? Just tell me where the law is that says that. Can you show me the law that says I can't film here? Is America a free country?
I told him they couldn't film here, and he's asking 9 million questions. I told him that's a federal government law. Hey, I told him he couldn't film here. He told me he's a citizen and all that. So
I told me I couldn't film here. I'm saying, where's the law that says I can't film here? And I'm asking other questions, sir.
Then Homeland Security showed up, because I was such a threat to Washington.
You got a driver's license, huh? Yeah, I do. Put that away for me.
After convincing Homeland Security I really wasn't Osama bin Laden, I kept wishing the IRS would allow me to interview somebody. Why wouldn't they show the law? What were they so nervous about? I began to have a frightening thought. What if it was our own government we had to be afraid of? With that disturbing thought in my mind, I went to see a group of tax experts.
You can look through the statutes and look for the law that requires you to pay. And when you do that, you can't identify a law that requires the average person in America who earns a wage and works in private business to pay an income tax.
The Constitution allows for two kinds of taxes. They're called direct and indirect.
The federal government in the Constitution can tax almost anything, as long as it apportions the tax if it's direct.
The indirect tax is, for example, an excise tax. I can avoid the excise tax on gasoline. I can choose to ride my bicycle. I can avoid the excise tax on tobacco. I can choose not to smoke, or I can grow my own tobacco.
The income tax which is being applied now doesn't meet the criteria of either direct or indirect taxes.
The IRS claims that in 1913, the 16th Amendment...
So, I don't understand those. Maybe somebody out there can explain it to me. So, the Constitution says there can be a direct tax on the people, but it has to be apportioned. So that would be, the government says we're going to tax, it's something that everybody's going to be taxed for, right? So like, let's, I don't know, a water tax, but it has to, you know, so everybody's going to have to use water. So we're putting a tax on water, but it has to be apportioned, so it has to be equally divided. So everybody is going to pay a 1% tax on water. So that's constitutional, right? Is that what they're saying? And then an indirect tax is something that, what did it say? Oh, just missed it. It must be uniform. So an indirect tax is something you can choose to not participate in, like he was talking about with gas. So gasoline, like what we have now, like he said earlier, there's a 42-cent tax on gasoline. That's the same. It's uniform. It's spread out. Okay, so that makes sense. So the income tax it's not an indirect tax because everybody has to work. You have to make a wage, right? So it would be a direct tax, but it's not apportioned because it varies, right? If you make a certain amount of money, you pay more. So it's an unconstitutional tax. It's an illegal tax. I think that's what that means. Just trying to wrestle through that idea there. Taxes are, all finances is incredibly complex to me. I don't understand, 1/10 of what I hear about finances and taxes, and like if you ever look at a tax book, it's incredibly thick. Like, who's supposed to know all that?
The income tax which is being applied now doesn't meet the criteria of either direct or indirect taxes.
The IRS claims that in 1913, the 16th Amendment, the Income Tax Amendment, allowed the government a third form of taxation. What was the Supreme Court's ruling on that?
The Supreme Court, in the case of Stanton versus Baltic Mining. I mean, what could be clearer than this? The provisions of the 16th Amendment conferred no new power of taxation.
The Rothschild case also said that the 16th Amendment did not impose any new taxes and did not change any of the taxing restrictions of the Constitution.
There were also several other major Supreme Court cases in that same period from 1916 up until about 1923.
Stratton Independence versus Hobart, Southern Pacific versus Lowe, Bowers versus Curbo Empire, Burnett versus Harmel, Doyle versus Mitchell.
It's actually very simple. Congress tried to enact an income tax in 1894. The Supreme Court said that's unconstitutional. When the Supreme Court says something is unconstitutional, it's unconstitutional. They tried again in 1913, and the Supreme Court said the 16th Amendment conferred no new power of taxation. So, if they didn't have it then, and they didn't get it, they don't have it. There is no constitutional basis for a tax on the wages of Americans living and working in the 50 states of the Union. Period. End of argument.
I have a letter here from Daniel Inouye's office of the United States Senate that says, based on the research performed by the Congressional Research Service, there is no provisions which specifically and unequivocally require an individual to pay an income tax. Period. End of story. There is no law, and to date, nobody has been able to show that there is a law for the average American citizen working day in and day out to pay an income tax.
The definition of income in the Constitution was given in the Eisner versus Macomber case, and it turns on gains or profits that are made from some activity.
Doyle versus Mitchell, 247 U.S. 179, 1918. Here's what he said. The idea of gain or increase arising from corporate activities. In other words, it doesn't mean wages, it doesn't mean dividends, it doesn't mean alimony. It means a gain or a profit arising from corporate activity.
That's another thing too. I don't understand the difference between gains and wages. Right? So wages is what you've earned. It's the way I understand it, you're not gaining because it's a fair trade, right? You're trading your time for a wage. You agree to another individual or a company that I will work X amount of hours for X amount of dollars. I will give you my time for this amount of dollars. So there's no gain there. It's a trade. So, right? Does that make sense? A gain, I don't understand. A gain would be an increase in money without trade, right? Does that make sense? Huh? I wish they would define terms in this, because they use a lot of, I don't understand that terminology, you know, and they talk about it like you should just understand it. Maybe I'm just dumb, maybe I don't get it, but what is a corporate gain? Profit, right? I don't understand how that works, but anyways, your labor is not taxable. It's not a legal tax.
These liens that are recorded against people by the government for tax liens are nothing more than allegations. They are non-substantive. They have never been determined by a neutral third party, such as a court, to have one shred of validity.
If you ever get a notice of an audit or anything else, the first thing you should do is a Freedom of Information Act request for records that they're using to substantiate or justify the audit.
There is nothing in the Internal Revenue Code that creates any such thing as an income tax evasion or crime. There's nothing in the code that allows IRS agents to seize property. The government is involved in judicial blackmail. The government knows that if it legally seizes somebody's property, that person doesn't have the funds and he can't even get a lawyer who can help him.
I conducted investigations in the Title 18, the Criminal Code, the U.S. Criminal Code. And in there, the statutes and the regulations are very specific. as to what's violating the statute in the Internal Revenue Code, Title 26. There's nothing specific in there. I mean, even the FBI is feared the IRS. So.
You have to understand that an agency which will unlawfully impose a tax that doesn't exist is not going to care. If we, the people, don't know what our rights are, they're not going to tell us.
If Americans just learned that the IRS was actually knowingly deceiving them, that would be enough for them to rise up and put a stop to it.
This small booklet includes the Constitution of the United States, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. This is a document that every citizen should read. It's a document which freed an entire nation. This is the Internal Revenue Code, and this document,
it's insane.
And the unlawful application of this document by the Internal Revenue Service has enslaved the nation that this document attempted to free.
I was very impressed with the people in the tax honesty movement.
Think about the laws, like, dude, if they really want to shut you down, if the government wants to get you, they're gonna get you. They'll find. Think about the size of that book. You're telling me you haven't violated one of those? There's something in there that every single one of us has done wrong, and they can charge us with some sort of tax crime. That's why I thought it was so ridiculous. Politics is all just a show. It's professional wrestling. It's good guy versus bad guy, and pretend behind the scenes they're all working on the same page. But it was so ridiculous back when Trump was running, and they were talking about, we need to see his taxes and whatnot. Dude, if they really were opposed to Trump, if he was really the enemy of these people and they really wanted to shut him down, they would have found something to charge him with and would have put him in prison. The fact that they don't just shows that he's just their puppet, that it was all just an illusion, just a way to get people divided, and they needed a bad guy. So it's just ridiculous.
They weren't kooks. They were highly intelligent, well-researched, and very genuine. I was wondering why I never heard about all these Supreme Court decisions in the media. So I really wanted the IRS's point of view, because to get the true story, it was imperative I hear both sides. I kept wishing Anthony Burke would call me back. He seemed like an honest man. I then proceeded to call my message machine.
Hi, this message is for Aaron Russo. This is Anthony Burke at the Internal Revenue Service. Let me suggest some people that you might want to think about talking to. One would be Don Alexander, who's a former commissioner who's here in town in Washington. Another would be Sheldon Cohen, who is both a former commissioner and former chief counsel. All those guys, I think, can answer your question about, where in the tax law it says that you have to pay taxes.
Wow, good news, I thought. So I called Sheldon Cohen because he used to be the IRS commissioner, he wrote the tax code, and he was also general counsel to the IRS. He is a true expert, and I couldn't find a better person to answer my questions. He graciously agreed to my interview. The reason I'm doing this documentary is because there are many people in America today who believe that there's no law that requires them to pay an income tax or file a 1040. And there are many people going to jail for it, fighting over it.
The Internal Revenue Code is authorized by the 16th Amendment.
I think it should be clarified. I think government should be transparent to the people. Why doesn't the IRS commissioner sit down with them and just explain it in clear English? Why?
I don't think they really care. I think they're just playing word games.
You don't think they're sincere people?
No, I don't think they're sincere people.
What does voluntary compliance mean?
And why does the IRS code say it's voluntary to comply, not mandatory?
That's a word euphemism we use. We use voluntary compliance when we talk about traffic signals. Most people at 2 o'clock in the morning, do you stop at a red light?
Yeah.
Is there a cop there?
Sometimes I don't.
Well, I do, and most of us do. Most of us do.
Right.
But that's voluntary compliance.
That was a complete perversion of logic. Traffic laws state that it is mandatory to stop at a red light.
Yeah, it's not voluntary.
The IRS code says it's voluntary to comply. Mandatory and voluntary are the complete opposite of each other. Yet he wants us to believe that they mean the same thing. So can the government criminally prosecute somebody of information put on their 1040?
Yes.
Right, so doesn't that violate the Fifth Amendment?
No.
But the Fifth Amendment says I don't have to do anything that incriminates myself.
Well, it doesn't incriminate you to put your income down.
But you said before I could be put in jail for it. The commissioner wants us to believe that although the IRS demands that you fill out the 1040 and you can go to jail for it, that they are not violating your Fifth Amendment rights of self-incrimination. That is absurd. Isn't it true that the word income is not defined anywhere in the Internal Revenue Code?
The law says that the government has a right to tax income from any source derived.
So, but the word income is not defined in the code. It just says income without a definition
That's right.
of what income is.
That's right.
Correct?
Yeah.
But there are many different kinds of taxes. Well, how can an American citizen know what income is if the code doesn't define it? If they're paying an income
Because
tax...
the courts have all defined it.
Do you remember what constitutional attorney Edwin Vieira said?
The definition of income in the Constitution was given in the Eisner versus Montgomery case, and it turns on gains or profits that are made from some activity.
So the Supreme Court has ruled income is not wages, it's not labor, it's gain from corporate activity. I believe
Fine with
that a man's labor is his private property.
That's your view, but it's not the law.
The Supreme Court's even said your labor is your private property. When I go to work for somebody, it's a trade. It's an even exchange. Yep. I do some work, you give me some money.
Chief among such contracts is that of personal employment by which labor and other services are exchanged for money or other forms of property. So
in 1916, we had the Brute case and the Stanton case. And the Brute case and the Stanton case said that the 16th Amendment gave the government no new taxing power.
I'm not going to argue the niceties of that with you.
And it came up again in a case called Peck versus Lowe, where the Supreme Court said the 16th Amendment did not extend Congress's taxing power to any new or accepted subjects. In other words, if you weren't taxable before the 16th, you weren't taxable after the 16th.
Today I interviewed a juror, okay, who sat on a case, and they found the person not guilty for lack of filing, okay? And I asked her why they found him not guilty. And she said because the IRS couldn't show us the law that made him liable to file a 1040.
All they need to do, if there is a law, is to show us the law, which of course they never did.
And the reason they didn't do it was why?
Because there is no law.
Title 26 requires you to file a return.
But doesn't Title 26 have to be in compliance with the Supreme Court decisions?
You're going to take a 1920 case and superimpose it on the whole Internal Revenue Code that was written after it? No, that's not.
I can't believe what I just heard. Rewind.
You're going to take a 1920 case and superimpose it on the whole Internal Revenue Code that was written after it? No, that's not.
Remember he said earlier the Internal Revenue Code was authorized by the 16th Amendment?
The Internal Revenue Code is authorized by the 16th Amendment.
Remember, the Supreme Court said the 16th Amendment did not give the government any new taxing power. These decisions have never been overturned. Let's listen further. Can the lower courts overrule the Supreme Court?
No.
How are they putting people in jail today for not paying a tax on their labor when the Supreme Court said they don't have to? Doesn't the IRS code have to be in compliance with the Supreme Court? That's my big question.
This is a waste of time.
Well,
because whatever I say, you're not going to believe.
He's right. I don't believe him. And neither should you. He wants us to believe we should obey the IRS code, which is being enforced in violation of the many Supreme Court decisions. If the Supreme Court made a decision...
Thank you, Aaron. I think we're finished.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cohen, you're doing that.
Well, I'm sorry that you constantly re-argue the point. You're liable because the law says that you're liable, and the courts say the law says you're liable, and that's why you're liable.
You see, he's talking about the lower courts, who are not in compliance with the Supreme Court, as they have to be. Doesn't the court have to be in compliance with the Supreme Court?
The Supreme Court has so held.
Where?
You caught me unprepared.
I'll come back.
Well, I don't want to do that.
But let me ask you a hypothetical question.
No. You're making silly arguments here.
Why is the Supreme Court decision a silly argument?
Well, because it's inapplicable.
That made my heart stop. He just said Supreme Court decisions do not apply to the IRS. That's the behavior you would expect from a totalitarian country, maybe China or Russia or Cuba.
Tyranny.
Not from America.
It's messed up.
They're just making up the law as they go along. Now I knew the tax honesty movement was right. The IRS thrives on intimidation and fear, not by law. It's no different than a criminal protection racket, using force to extract your money from you. Then the former IRS commissioner, now working at a prestigious Washington law firm, threatens me. Watch.
Aaron, you understand Yiddish. Cornish helfen.
For those of you who don't understand Yiddish, that means nothing will help you. Now it all became clear. I understood why the IRS wouldn't go on camera and talk about where the law was. I understood why all the senators I called refused to be interviewed. There is no law. And now you know what our political leaders and the courts have known for decades and have tried to cover up. The United States Constitution strictly forbids a direct, unapportioned tax on the wages and salaries of American citizens. The United States Supreme Court has consistently ruled that the income tax is a tax on profits and gains, not on labor and wages. On behalf of the American people, I challenge the IRS to show me a statute that allows a direct, unapportioned tax on the wages and labor of the American people. And if I'm wrong, I will give my most humble apologies to the IRS. If the IRS is wrong, and there is no law, then every person who's been jailed should be let out of jail immediately, and any assets seized should be returned to their rightful owners.
Yeah.
If this is a nation of laws and a free country, then the IRS should show the law to the American people. I felt...
All right, we're going to pause there. Just 39:42, so we'll pick up there when we continue. He's going to get into how this all ties into the New World Order. He's just showing his journey, discovering the tyranny, and then like how can this be? When you discover this, it's shocking. Like I remember, when I first got saved, I thought President Bush was a Christian man. I was like, yes, we got a Christian in office. And when I learned the truth about 9/11, it was like, why are they doing this? What's the purpose? And so then if you're a curious person like me, you'll end up diving in deep and just researching for years, which is what Aaron Russo is going to do here. We're going to get into some bigger stuff here in the second part of this DVD. All right, so that's what I got for you guys here today. Lord willing, we'll pick up with the rest of this. I think there's about an hour left, a little bit more than an hour, so we should be able to get through it in one more watching. But Lord willing, we'll pick up next time. All right, thanks for watching, guys. I love you, and we'll talk to you later.